Disability Organizing Network is very happy to have Yvonna Cazares with us today in our Conversations in Civic Courage series. And this is a series dedicated to learning from other social justice movements so that we can figure out and find out the best practices of what's helped them make them successful and their lessons learned, and apply those to our own community organizing in the disability community. And today's, and really quickly, I will be describing images. So this first slide has an image of a young girl who is an amputee, and she has a prosthetic leg, and she's in what looks to be like a hospital.
Thank you, Ted. I'll also add that the reason why I chose the picture is because of her face, and her face really evokes this determination and this, I would say, a courageous look that she's moving forward, and she's got a vision or a goal in sight. So hi everyone, thank you for having me. Folks, when your statewide organizer, Ted, invited me to present for this webinar series, I was really honored, and that's because I respect the efforts and the people of CFILC and the DOnetwork. Ted and I worked together previously on implementation of the Fair Education Act to reduce bullying of actual and perceived LGBTQ youth in schools when I was policy manager of the Gay Straight Alliance Network. Thanks again, Ted, for having me. This presentation, the next slide.
There is an image of 3 people. It looks like maybe one person in front and 2 behind riding bicycles. Go ahead, Yvonna.
Thanks. So as Ted mentioned, our topic today addresses how to increase broad support for issues that you and I care about. In this case, it is better air quality, or the right for every resident to breathe clean air. And I'm not sure if you know this, but TED has a motto, and that motto is everyone counts, and nothing rings truer here. I live by a similar motto, and that is, the bigger the dream, the more people you will need. And today we will dig a little deeper into how you can bring more people into your circle and spheres of influence for a common cause. Next slide. So my name is Yvonna Cazares, and I'm a public information specialist with the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. I'm responsible for developing and implementing all manner of community engagement activities, including coordinating community grants, working with low-income and English language learner communities, working with schools, businesses, and other government agencies, general public education, media relations, community affairs, and social media management. But that only gives you a little bit about me and what I do for work right now. Next slide, please.
This slide has an image of a trailer and then a house with a pool next to it.
And I put this in here because I wanted to let you know where I come from. I grew up in Palm Springs. You may have heard of it. It is a vacation getaway and retirement community in Southern California. Some might even say it's a rich or wealthy place, but my parents moved there to be closer to good schools and lots of parks. While my family started out living in the working class neighborhoods of Palm Springs, even those neighborhoods had it better than where my cousins lived 40 minutes down the road in rural towns like Coachella, Mecca, and Thermal, where mostly poor farm workers lived in mobile home trailer parks like the one you may see. Growing up, I thought this was somehow unfair. Next slide, please.
And this slide has an image of the Coachella Valley as a map, and our presenter is going to explain what the different images mean on the map.
Thanks, Ted. So what I found out later on is that indeed studies have shown, and this map is from UC Davis Center for Regional Change, shows the environmental impacts or the differences in resources from one part of the Coachella Valley where I grew up to the other part. So for me, growing up, I would ask myself, how could failing schools and high crime be concentrated in certain areas of our community. How could people not have safe places to play steps away from where they lived? Why is it that museums and libraries were somehow scarce in these areas as well? And when I visited my cousins, it was very apparent to me that the skies weren't clear and blue, but instead a hazy brown. And you could see the dust coming off a lot of the farms and pesticide from the farms as well. It didn't feel like this inequality should exist, especially in this type of community where there is a lot of wealth. Next slide, please.
There's no image on this slide?
I was sad and mad, and I put the hashtag here seriously because I just felt that families and children were suffering needlessly. People's futures were at stake. I had a lot of friends who dropped out of school or who went to jail or were even killed because of drugs or gangs. And it meant that a lot of people were not going to graduate, were not going to fulfill their potential. I could see growing up that there were people that were not able to find jobs in the areas and the towns that they lived in, and they had to travel very far if they had access to transportation to get to those jobs. And this meant that not all people were given the opportunity to live in a healthy and safe community. And growing up, I learned that not all of this was by accident, but also that things could and had to be changed, and that all lives mattered. Next slide, please.
And there's no image on this slide as well.
So I put here a quote from Helen Keller, and that speaks to the importance of how do you find a way to get other people to care about this the way that I did, right? I mean, this presentation is about organizing people. So how do you get people to support the same cause, or to not have apathy, but to actually show solidarity and, again, be in alignment with what the issues you're working on. And I figured out that in college I knew I liked to read and write, but I didn't realize it was later that I realized that it was because I loved hearing people's stories and engaging with people's stories as I read and wrote. And the idea that people personally triumphed against incredible odds is great, but also to hear how people struggled, shared their stories of struggle with their neighbors and friends, and together changed a community or an institution to be more fair, to be more accessible to everyone, was even more moving and striking to me. And it was the power of these stories and relationship building that was the building block to getting people to open their hearts and minds and move policy. Next slide, please.
This slide has an image of a couple of people sitting in what looks to be like a classroom, and the folks that are sitting there are adults.
And one of those people is a council member. He was actually the vice mayor for the city of Coachella. And another one is Eleazar Cano. Eleazar is someone who I met when I was a community organizer. So I was just talking about the importance of telling your story and the importance of relationship building. And this is a tool to help organize folks. So when I was an organizer, I went out and had one-to-one conversations with people, and I met Eleazar Cano. He had a wife and a daughter and was blind. Eleazar told me about how hard it was to walk safely around his neighborhood. Crime was one thing, but mostly his first concerns were the crumbling or non-existent sidewalks, and the fact that there were some really busy intersections with lots of traffic that did not have a sounding signal. When I brought Eleazar with me to a city planning department meeting, folks were pretty much floored by some of the stories that he shared. The great thing is that we developed a relationship with city officials and staff in these conversations. Next slide, please.
There's no image on this slide.
And the message that came across in his stories was that where you live determines your health. The power was in the relationship, in that soon a lot of the staff at the city planning department and other areas wanted to know a little bit more what it was like and to live and walk in Eleazar's shoes, and we organized a walk tour through the neighborhood. We were able to secure through this walking tour additional monies for projects to calm traffic, fix the sidewalks, and add sound signals. And while we didn't get everything we wanted, it was a start. And the importance here is that Eleazar's story and his willingness to tell it helped not just Eleazar, but mothers and children and elderly folks who could now use the streets safely. Some had even worked with Eleazar and city officials and shared their stories about issues they felt were putting their health and safety at risk in their own community. So the work continued, which was great. Next slide, please.
This slide has an image of a freeway, and the freeway is leading towards a hill with a lot of houses on it.
So many things can limit our ability to live a healthy life. For example, a lot of people don't know that air pollution affects our health. Cars and trucks produce a large part of air pollution, and this impacts the air we breathe. Studies show that people who live, work, or attend school near major roads appear to have an increased incidence and severity of health problems associated with air pollution exposures to roadway traffic. Next slide, please.
This slide has a series of 3 maps, all of which are the San Francisco Bay Area.
And these maps actually show where there are higher incidence of smog-forming ozone near the ground, so basically toxic air pollutant chemicals that form as a result of some of those major roadways I was talking about, usually situated around freeways. And then the maps also show where a lot of people are at risk for cancer, which is in those same vicinities. And that's because pollutants directly emitted from cars, trucks, and other motor vehicles are found in higher concentrations near major roads. Examples of directly emitted pollutants include particulate matter, or PM, as you might hear it, carbon monoxide, oxides of nitrogen, benzene, and other hundreds of chemicals emitted by cars. Cars also emit compounds that lead to the formation of other pollutants in the atmosphere, such as nitrogen dioxide and ozone. Beyond vehicle's tailpipe and evaporative emissions, roadway traffic also emits brake and tire debris and can throw road dust into the air. Next slide, please.
And this slide does not have an image on it.
Individually and in combination, many of these pollutants found near roadways have been associated with adverse health effects. People who live, work, or attend school near major roads appear to have an increased incidence and severity of health problems that may be related to air pollution from roadway traffic. Health effects have been associated with proximity to roads include asthma onset and aggravation, cardiovascular disease, reduced lung function, impaired lung development in children, preterm and low birth weight infants, childhood leukemia, and premature death. Other than air pollution, road noise may also play a role in the health problems associated with roadway exposure. Next slide, please.
And this slide has a picture of a rail yard, a set of 4 train tracks going into a tunnel. Behind it is a hill with homes on it.
So here I talk about the disability in the rail gap. And that's because for years, Policymakers and advocates have said a key strategy to reduce air pollution is to reduce car use by bringing needed housing next to transportation hubs. So get people out of their cars, get them into public transportation, or make sure that their housing and their jobs are just close to each other and close to transportation hubs. However, transit hubs like BART and Caltrain are often still near highways, ports, and rail facilities. And so you're still putting people at risk of these toxic compounds and often exacerbating a lot of the issues faced by already vulnerable populations such as youth and seniors, low-income families, people with low education levels, people with respiratory health problems, and those without health care. So the strategy of putting everyone in public transit does not work when public transit also is not fully accessible to everyone. Caltrain has done a better job at this, but for years there was a problem on some rail systems in which there was an overly wide gap between the car and the platform, and folks who were trying to onboard or disembark from the trains who were using wheelchairs were injured a lot of the time, and it was dangerous. So next slide, please.
This slide has a picture of a person with a painter's mask on, and they're standing in front of some type of factory or power plant with 3 smokestacks emitting smoke.
My point is here that both the natural and built environment impacts our health. Not one policy strategy fits all, but we can strive to strengthen our policies and make them more effective, as new studies and stories require us to. This slide is here because there's just been another study showing that there is a link between fine particulate matter and increased autism risk. And this study came out of the Harvard School of Public Health. Next slide, please.
There are no images on this slide.
And if you didn't know, 1 in 7 Bay Area residents has a respiratory condition, and so protecting our air is critical. And that's why it's important for us to regulate and educate folks on the importance of protecting our air. So now we're going to talk about how we do this at the Air District, and how I've done this previously as a community organizer. Next slide, please.
This slide has an image of several different topics that I'm sure Yvonna is going to talk about in circles, and the circles all come together in a bubble-like formation. Yes.
They all come together around one central idea, and that's working together with the public to protect the air. So here there is sort of a visual of the different agencies, government agencies that address air quality issues. It's not just the Air District. We only play one certain role, but we also have other agencies like the city planning commissions. They decide where to put homes, downtown centers, power plants. And the Air Resources Board, which is a state agency, sets standards on mobile sources of pollution like cars and trucks, and sets standards on the fuel and emissions from those things. Next slide, please.
This slide has an image of a map of the Bay Area.
And here I wanted to give you a sense of the jurisdiction, the area that we cover, because the Air District protects and improves air quality and public health in the 9 counties that surround the San Francisco Bay, where there are over 7 million residents. Next slide, please.
This slide has an image of 6 circles. The center circle has 3 figures, kind of stick figures of a person, and then the other 5 slides around it has information in them and images. One image looks like a factory, the other a person at a desk, the other one some money or a dollar bill. Another one is a type of round house, and then the other one looks like paper with a magnifying glass over it.
And these images represent the different divisions that we have in our agency. So there's rule development where we create new rules and regulations about air quality. The person at the desk is basically the role that I play as a public information specialist doing outreach and education. The symbol with the money is representative of our grants and incentives division, where we fund the different projects that reduce air pollution. Next slide, please.
There's no images on this slide.
We ensure that businesses, for example, comply with air pollution laws and regulations. We have a large team of inspectors who, in 2013, responded to a number of air quality complaints and made over 21,000 inspections. Next slide, please.
The image on this slide is of a transport truck. And the hood is open, and there's a man with a yellow vest looking inside of it.
This is a picture of one of our staff conducting a diesel truck inspection. When we found out that West Oakland had one of the highest rates of potential cancer risk in the Bay Area due to its proximity to major freeways, the Port of Oakland, the Union Pacific Rail Yard, etc., we work with community-based organizations, trucking companies to help them comply with rules and regulations that ban older engines and educated drivers on not idling to reduce emissions. Next slide, please.
This slide does not have an image.
And so we've provided funding for not just trucks, but other businesses to replace and retrofit their equipment with cleaner emissions technology. In 2013, we gave $56.25 million for clean air projects in 2013. Next slide, please.
This slide has an image of several people inside of a van.
And we give out grants and funding. Some of that, there's millions that I was just talking about, go to rolling out the first bike share program in the nation to debut as a regional system. And in the case of this slide, we also support people who ride together in a van pool to work or to school or to their hospitals, things like that. Anybody that is trying to reduce emissions and carpools, we're supportive of those types of projects and transit modes. Next slide, please.
There's no image on this slide.
And our ideas for programs that reduce smog and improve health come from our work with different partners and when we are engaging community members. In 2013, we had 192 community meetings. These are often times where we're going out and we're invited to an event, or we host an event here at the Air District or in some particular county. Next slide, please.
Here's a slide of several people holding up signs and drawings that they've made, and it looks like it might be inside of a school.
In February, we held our second annual Youth for the Environment and Sustainability Conference. So those folks holding up signs, they're holding up signs that they made about how they support action against climate change, how they support different modes of transportation rather than just one single person in a car, truck. And young people from across the Bay presented at this conference their projects on how they got more people to carpool together to school or take the bus. It is these types of locally led ideas that we strive to support. Next slide.
This slide has a few images on it. At the top, there's an image of, in black and white, of a boat with many people on it, and then there's in color below it an image of a boat. Then there's the image of a child playing, and they're wearing red boots. And then there is an image of several people in black and white sitting on a lawn.
And so when we highlight some of the strategies and success stories from these projects that reduce air pollution, we highlight them on our social media pages. I hope that you all are trying to use social media in a way that increases your message and spreads it across more, many more audiences. As you know, social media posts don't have to be as hardline educational, but just engaging because they're funny or interesting. In this case, on this slide, there are these pictures of how people took the ferry, back in the day, many, many years ago, decades ago, and a picture of a ferry, which is the way people get to work now. So that's just something people find interesting, and they're able to engage with you online. Next slide, please.
There's no image on this slide.
Another strategy we use to work with the public and improve air quality is engaging in one-to-one conversations. Just a few weeks ago, several of our staff were contacted by a couple out of Napa concerned about the Sire rock quarry and its plans for expansion. While staff answered many of their questions through email, without me going out and sitting down with them to hear their concerns and see the pictures they took at the dust particulate matter in the area, we wouldn't have known the extent of the problem and made our permit engineers in charge of the quarry's permit aware of this. So highly encourage one-to-one conversations as a way to organize communities for better air quality and work to address these issues together. Next slide, please.
The image on this slide is of three young boys at a table, and it looks to be a table or booth at a festival. And then there's another man wearing a ball cap who's on the other side of the table in the booth.
Yes, and the booth is about our Spare the Air program, and so this is, sometimes it is about showing up and tabling at public events where folks can come to you if they have questions, and you can have a dialogue with residents. For example, this weekend I was all day Saturday at the Earth Day SF Festival, and it was really great. A lot of people came up and asked questions about air quality. They talked about concerns that they had. They talked about family members living with COPD or respiratory problems, and this is a way that you are interacting with the public and that the folks see that you're visible in their community. Next slide, please.
This image is of a set of train tracks surrounded by a lot of green trees.
And you may see that the train tracks, if you can imagine, some are going in different directions. And the point of this slide is that the Air District came to a couple years ago basically a growth point in the way that they engage the public. Despite our many efforts and strategies to organize diverse communities for better air quality, we had many community groups approach us who felt we were not on the right path still. Next slide.
There's no image on this slide.
And so although we had made great strides with some of our community engagement efforts, we realized through this community feedback that we had more work to do. Next slide, please.
This slide has an image of what appears to be several bowls inside one another with small seeds or beans inside each bowl.
And this is just a symbol of concentric circles, right? So as an agency, we needed to take a hard look at who is in our circles, who is in our sphere of influence, and ask who will we not including and engaging enough regularly or not at all. Next slide, please.
This slide has an image of a man in a scooter traveling on the side of the road paved road in traffic at a traffic light.
The feedback we were getting from several groups was that more voices were needed in our decision making and in our engagement efforts. We needed to hear from the Eleazar Ganos of the world about how and where we were falling short in terms of reaching out to the public. Next slide, please.
There are no images on this slide.
Such was the impetus for our public participation plan. We needed to do a better job at reaching limited English proficient residents, folks learning English. And next slide, please.
This slide has several images moving from left to right in a lower to upper slant. And the first one is a thinking bubble with a pencil and some paper. The next one is a dialog box with the sort of international webinar globe symbol with an arrow. The next one is, again, a dialog box with two people facing one another. And then the next one is a thought bubble with a person at a podium. The next one is a dialog box with a set of 6 people at a conference table. And then the last one is, again, kind of a thought bubble with 2 hands that are shaking.
And so this is sort of a scale or a spectrum of outreach and informing the public to actual engagement activities. So we further recognize the need to better provide information to Bay Area stakeholders regarding how and when they might engage with the Air District to share their comments, concerns, and questions. So as I was saying about people coming to us at events, so that is good that they get to learn more information, but sometimes they might come to us with complaints, and we'd have to let them know of the different ways that they can actually influence decisions and rules or workshops that were coming up that they can give their input, and that our staff would be required to respond to it. So it's just about educating the public about what are the best ways to influence different decisions and where we can partner together and how we can better improve our processes as well. Next slide, please.
This slide has a map of the East Bay area, or I think this is Alameda County. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, great.
And as part of this plan, we analyzed and mapped out different language-speaking populations in each county of the Bay Area. As you may be able to see here, one of the maps that we did was on Chinese-speaking populations in Alameda County. And we did this to understand the communities impacted by, say, refineries in a particular city, or a number of different upcoming policies that we might create. Now we know which communities live where. Next slide, please.
There's no image on this slide.
So we did this to better target our outreach efforts for our public workshops. It was important for us to provide opportunities for meaningful engagement. Next slide, please.
This slide has a few images on it. One is of a bus stop. The next one is of an anti-smoking poster in a business district, and then the last one is an anti-smoking billboard.
And so here these are some of our wood smoke advertisements, because wood smoke actually produces a lot of particulate matter, which we talked about earlier, which I discussed earlier, can be harmful to folks and is a harmful toxic air pollutant. So our Spare the Air campaign, a lot of our advertisements benefited from being translated into even more languages and spreading to more areas after our language analysis. Next slide, please.
This slide has an image. It's a close-up on a microphone.
And for us, what was really important, again, was our process of including people in rulemaking and how we developed policies. If we were updating a rule or a policy and it will impact our particular community and they have a chance to weigh in on it, will we be having meetings at places and times that are accessible to all people? Will they know whether their voices are heard and if that is the best meeting to influence outcomes? So for us, this public participation plan was helping us reflect on a lot of these questions to better serve the public and work with the public to improve air quality. Next slide, please.
This slide has a picture of a handmade poster that says Community Forum here, and then it also says the same words in Spanish. So, for example, would there be, excuse me, would there be translation and interpretation services available at these meetings? Would we have enough headsets for the people that were coming who needed interpretation services? Would we be open to partnering with a community group that is trusted by the community in order to best present information? Sometimes folks who are working for a community-based organization are able to better break down some of the concepts to people, to public, rather than an agency who might be stuck in, say, very technical jargon. So how do we work with those community groups to present information jointly? That way people can really come away with the information in a more clear way, in a way that is from a trusted messenger. Next slide, please. This slide does not have an image. So at the same time that we were asking ourselves these questions and working on new strategies to work with more diverse communities, we began the CARE program, or the Community Air Risk Evaluation Program, to identify the communities in the region most affected by air pollution and the populations most vulnerable to the health impacts of pollution. Next slide, please. This slide has an image of an African American woman. This woman is Margaret Gordon. She's pictured here. She's a person who was one of the community leaders that joined us on our CARE task force. So we partnered with multiple organizations and community leaders to form this CARE task force and identify populations that were vulnerable to various types of air pollution and the cumulative impacts of those air pollution and other factors. The partnership I talked about earlier, where advocates were educating truck drivers in West Oakland, was part of this CARE program effort, and the Air District in the end directed funds or money for other additional air pollution reduction projects in these areas. So this is an example of a great partnership in a way that we worked with community leaders, which is a strategy to organize diverse communities for better air quality. Next slide, please. This slide has an image, and it is a letter regarding legislation. So this led to new ways of working together. When Cal EPA, that's the Environmental Protection Agency, the state division of that federal agency, began to put together a tool for identifying vulnerable communities around the state to invest climate change money in, they asked for input on the first draft of their tool called Cal EnviroScreen. Since we had developed and strengthened relationships with community leaders, we were then able to speak with more authority and work with these leaders in giving feedback to Cal EPA about how their tool left a lot of these communities out, and that yet they were still, in fact, disproportionately impacted by air pollution. So our relationships with these leaders were good ones, and then we were able to work together to give feedback to the state agency to say, hey, you're leaving out really highly impacted cities or towns in the Bay Area. You need to revise your tool to include these communities.
So we were having collectively a stronger voice to improve air quality in these communities. Next slide, please.
This slide does not have an image.
So we're coming to the end of the presentation, and here's where I'm recapping what, summarizing what we learned. To recap the strategies for organizing diverse communities for better air quality, we learned a number of things. Next slide, please.
This slide does not have an image.
First and foremost, the importance of relationship building and relationship maintenance. We were told by some communities that our relationship was not strong enough and that we were not visible or had enough of a presence. That enabled us to go out and do additional analysis of communities that we weren't aware were there, and how could we reach those communities through different language means, through different community leaders. How did we do it made us realize we had a lot of people to develop relationships with. Next slide, please.
This slide has an image of a giraffe and a zebra surrounded by a lot of green trees in a field.
And the zebra kind of looks like it's smiling, but basically, like this giraffe and zebra, we had to think of some of our critics and as partners and really go out and do more listening to understand where we were falling short. So many groups that we didn't have relationships with that we said, oh, we didn't reach this Chamber of Commerce. We had not gone and spoken with the Girl Scouts. We had not gone and spoken with this type of community and what their interests and their needs were. We had to assume all our potential allies. Next slide, please.
This slide has an image of a pole with a yellow band around it, a green one, a blue one, and a red one. They look like rubber bands hanging down from the pole.
So as you're, and the symbolism behind this photo is that values are common ground, that even if these rubber bands are different colors, that they're, the idea is that no matter what, as you're listening out, as you're going out and you're listening, if you're an organizer, if you're someone who works for an agency, you want to catch what people care about. You can ask, who do they love? What keeps them up at night? What you'll hear is people talk about their values. Values are what align us and bring us together. Even if people might seem at odds with the way you're approaching an issue, what keeps the bigger picture in mind are values. So when you talk about shared values, you're able to bring more people along for your issue and work long-term on strategies to address that issue. Next slide, please.
This slide has an image of a man holding a cell phone. Looks like he is texting on it.
And here, another important strategy for organizing communities, diverse communities, is meeting people where they are. So in this case, the gentleman might be on social media. And so you should have a presence there. Having a youth-led conference where youth can speak openly and not feel talked down to, where they're leading the conference and not just listening to adults speak. That's meeting people where they are, because young people are able to have this free exchange of ideas. And also, even simply showing up at a trusted community space to listen, rather than expecting people to come to your organization or come to your agency or to your workshop, is again so important, because they're meeting people where they are. Where is it convenient for them to meet, and at their time when they're able to get off of work or out of school? How can you meet people where they are so that you're able to actually start a dialogue? This includes even the format and way that you present information. So a lot of bureaucrats or district staff make the mistake of presenting information in highly technical language and forget that people just want to understand what is happening in plain terms. This presentation today is, I hope, aiming to be more culturally competent and actually being presented in a way that reaches more people about this important topic, which is engaging the community about issues we care about. Next slide, please.
This slide does not have an image.
And so at bottom, we, as an agency, but I would say this cuts across again for nonprofits, for advocacy organizations, for community-based organizations, that being open to trying tested and emerging approaches for engaging new people in developing relationships is so important. We had to learn new ways of doing this, of engaging all families, and including some which we were not yet comfortable with. So a lot of technical staff, engineers or scientists or chemists in our agency don't really know how to work with the public as much, and it's important that our agency actually wrote up a plan, reflected on it, gathered input about it from the public, and we're open to trying these new strategies and training staff and folks internally on how to try these emerging approaches. And I see that you're doing that here with this presentation as well. So next slide, please.
This slide has a group of youth in wheelchairs on a basketball court. It looks like they're playing some type of game, maybe basketball.
And here the importance is we're still working on implementation of a lot of our strategies to broaden support for better air quality, but we remain committed to clean air and healthy life for all Bay Area residents. So this really concludes my presentation, and the next slide is dedicated to folks who might have questions. I'd love to talk more or be more specific about strategies in detail if you have specific questions.
Great. This slide has 3 question marks on it, and thank you so much, Yvonna, for your presentation. I really learned a lot watching it, and we're going to open the floor to questions right now. I am going to start us off with a question, and that is that I'm seeing a lot of very universal things in the work that you're talking about in ways that we reach out to folks and engage people. When you were doing this, and you have just a really broad base of different types of people that you need to reach out to, what did you find was really helpful specifically in reaching out to people with disabilities? You talk about reaching out and finding people where they're at. So one of those things might be helpful for us is like, where are they? How did you reach out to them? Where did you reach out to them? Very interested to know that.
Mm-hmm. So one, the benefit of knowing leaders like you, Ted, and advocacy organizations like CSILC is huge. I feel like that what I've heard is that your organization is very well trusted in the community, and so when I mentioned one of the strategies as develop and strengthen relationships, oftentimes you can go back to the people that you know, even if you work with them before, and say, hey, who else might you know? So that's one thing, is just really tapping those relationships and saying, who else could you introduce me to, or we actually need to do more work in this area. Another group that we've relied on are the people who are the disability representatives on MTC's board or advisory board. So for instance, MTC is the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. We work very closely with that agency because we want to support public transit, carpooling, alternative forms of transit that aren't just commuting by yourself in a car or truck, for instance. And so we work with them, and on their board, their advisory board, are a number of disability representatives. Those are folks who I'm trying to set up meetings with as well to get a sense of their thoughts. And so it really is just kind of tapping into your existing network, and then also finding folks in schools that, different services, programs that serve people with disabilities, finding out if they have stories that they know or people or leaders in the groups that they have. That way we can talk to them and find out their opinions and about these issues like air quality or transportation methods, and is it accessible, and what does this mean to them? I mean, that's sort of the way that I'm trying to go about engaging folks in the disability community.
That's great. Folks, if you're on the teleconference line and you'd like to ask some questions, you can unmute your phone by pressing *6. Are there any other questions out there? Well, I'll ask one final question. Unless someone else has a question, you can raise your hand, or you can pop in after Yvonna answers this question. But I'm kind of going to ask the same thing, but a little bit in reverse. So, within the environmental justice community, if our folks who spend so much time working in community organizing in the disability community, what's your advice for our folks when they want to reach out to folks in the environmental justice community? Where are the places that they should be going, and where should they be building relationships?
Mm-hmm. So for us as an agency, we have a list of environmental justice and climate change and public health organizations that I would absolutely love to introduce you to via email, or just share their email and phone numbers with you if you'd like, or anyone who's interested. And a lot of these groups are like folks who, Urban Habitat comes to mind, Communities for a Better Environment, CVE, comes to mind. There's 350.org. There is the Bay Area, I think it's Health Equity Initiative, or BAYAC. So a lot of these are like coalition groups that have a number of different groups that are environmentalist or environmental justice-based groups within them. So I would definitely be able to connect you with those groups.
And along those lines, Yvonna, are there like regular meetups or regular events that go on in the environmental justice community that our folks might want to check out and start participating in?
Yes, there are. I don't have the dates in front of me, but I can definitely research those dates and send them out to you. They definitely have meetings, probably monthly, and others quarterly, that you all can attend for sure.
Great. Well, thank you very much. If there aren't any more questions, I'm going to wrap us up here. I want to thank you, Yvonna, for joining us today. It's so amazing how the work just continues and transforms when you're a community organizer. We started working on LGBT rights work. Both of us worked, although in separate circles, not knowing each other at the time, I think on Prop 8 stuff here in California, and it went to LGBT and disability connections on education, and now we're talking about using the same community organizing technique to reach some common goals for a cleaner environment and a healthier environment. And that's important in the disability community, especially for those in the community who have a chemical sensitivity disability. So it's great to have you with us again today, and thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.